welcome back to yet another chat video. Today I kind of want to talk to you about how experimentation helped me to not only become a better artist, but find my style and my voice. And this has been quite a journey. So just for a bit of a backstory, I want to kind of go through why I started a YouTube channel in the first place. And this was about, I want to say 3 years ago that I started the YouTube channel. It was a way of me not only getting over my fear of putting myself out there as an artist, but also to kind of film my progress or journey as an artist. And I think that I had been stuck in a rut for a really long time. I had a year of doing nothing but commissions. And when you are constantly painting other people's ideas or painting photographs that they give you because they want a portrait of their grandma Molly on her 90th birthday exactly as she's seen in the photograph, it doesn't leave much for your own creativity or imagination to kind of play around with ideas. You're just constantly focused on rendering and making it look as much like the person even though you never knew them, so you really have to pay attention to all of those details. And when you do that for any length of time, what can end up happening is you can get really stuck in this almost robotic painting. You're no longer an artist, you are just a robot, and what you do is you render and you render and you render, and there's very little artistic expression that's involved with that. So when I started the YouTube channel, I wanted to play around with different mediums and kind of experiment. I didn't really aim for getting viewership or anything like that. It was almost more for me to watch these videos, and yeah, I made them public because I was like, well, you know, maybe somebody else will find what I'm doing interesting or helpful, and they might want to play around with some of the same techniques that I'm playing around with. What I found after 3 years is that all of the experiments that I have done, whether it be with embellishing acrylic pours or mixed media collage or texture or, you know, abstract realism, playing with all of these different mediums, it has opened up different pathways in my brain. So the first thing that I will say about doing experiments is that it helps you get out of a creative rut. And when I was in that creative rut of just like, well, give me a photograph and I'll paint it, but couldn't really think for myself or utilize the creativity that I always had when I was a kid. I drew from my imagination. It just was almost like I had shut that part of my brain down and I was working purely on the analytical calculation, mix paints to be the exact color needed to create this portrait. And there was very little spontaneity at that point with the artwork. And so I really had to get out of this rut. And the best way for me to do it was to do something with a medium that I had very little control over. So the acrylic pouring came into play because it's like, yeah, you're not being meticulous with detail when you're using a blow dryer and blowing paint all over a canvas. And I was trying really hard to just be like, okay, so once that's done, I want to see what pops into my head when I look at these patterns. And that would give me an idea for a painting. Granted, it was usually a portrait, and that's what I've always done. I've always been a portrait artist to some degree. So before I started painting, it was pencil portraits and charcoal portraits. And then when I started painting, it was even more portraits. I just love painting portraits. So that is kind of my thing. There's always a theme of portraits within my artwork. Once in a while, I may go off onto like, okay, I'm gonna paint some animals or do something like that, but it always comes back to humans. And that's just what I like to do. So What I did find is that every time I was playing with a new medium, I would do a series of like 7 pieces in that medium. I was really into it. I'm like, yeah, maybe this is my style. And then after those 7 pieces, I was like, yeah, no. It was like dating art supplies, where you're trying to find the tools and the mediums that you actually have chemistry with. And then you realize that, well, the relationship was great at the beginning, but now, you know, the passion's gone. So I would move on to something else, and I would be like, yeah, this is great. Okay, I love cutting out pieces of paper for collage, and I'm gonna do all of these different things. And then after 7 pieces, I was like, yeah, well, you know, the love is gone. Yeah, not really feeling it. And it happened every single time I switched to a different style or these different mediums, as I would be so excited about it and just like, oh, yes, I found it. And then I would be like, no, okay, not so much. So it was great though, because what it ended up doing was it made me inspired to start painting certain themes. And what I came to realize is, like, coming full circle as an artist, is that my imagination when I was a child was always fantasy driven. So I was looking at the patterns within all of the artworks with these different styles, and I was like, you know, it's crazy that even though I'm working with these different mediums and different styles, there's a theme going on here. And I'm seeing the theme is that there is this sort of gravitational pull towards fantasy and surrealism. So what I discovered first was, okay, I kind of am figuring out what my voice is, because I'm figuring out what the theme is. And then I thought about, it was like kind of, you go into like a meditative state or whatever, and you're like, well, what parts of the process do I dread, and what parts of the process do I really enjoy? And what I figured out there is that what I look forward to most is the oil painting part of things. So, all right, my favorite thing is oil paint. I love painting with oils. Now, that was a pivotal moment for me, because what I discovered about myself is that I, in fact, am an oil painter, and that is my medium of choice. The next thing I had to kind of figure out is how to get past all of my limiting beliefs based off of what the art community thinks and this and that, because I was so used to doing commissions for people and make them happy that I wasn't actually thinking about what made myself happy. So, you know, you can't spend your life either chasing an algorithm or chasing views or chasing likes or anything like that, or even listening to the narrative of the art world, like I talked about in the last video where I was, you know, is fantasy art real art? And yes, it is real art. So I am finally, you know, like after 3 years of going through the motions and trying to figure out who I am as an artist, because I was completely lost when I started this journey. And I don't know if any of you can relate, if you've ever gone through something similar to this, but man, it's hard. It's hard when you lose yourself creatively, and then you kind of have to do everything that you can think of in order to dig yourself out of that hole that you've digging for yourself. What? Yeah, all of those challenges that I faced during this whole process, what it ended up doing was it improved my skills. I did probably, I want to say 300 to 400 paintings over the past 3 years. Of course, I did not put all of them on YouTube, but small paintings, large paintings, paintings that ended up going like, ooh, that's not a good one. But what it did was, because I was so focused on trying to figure out who I was as an artist, I ended up improving my skill set tremendously. And my skills are so much better than they were when I started. It's absolutely crazy. I learned so much. And through each experiment, I learned a new technique. I learned a new way of doing things. But because of this whole like throwing ingredients into a pot and hoping that it doesn't explode, I had to really think outside the box when I was doing anything. And like, well, would this work? And what that ended up doing was made me see things differently. My perception changed completely. And I ended up researching artists that I had never heard of. Now, I didn't go to art school, so I didn't have the benefit of learning art history. I had to learn that on my own. And I dug in deep. Let me tell you, I dug in deep as far as learning art history, learning the different painting styles, trying to figure out what resonated with me, and you just end up like with all of this knowledge that I did not have when I started. It was kind of like, if I look at the portraits I was doing beforehand, yeah, they're good, but they're not as good as I paint now. I paint way better now. I have a tremendous amount of experience and hours put into this whole entire thing, and it is wild. It has been such a wild ride. So the moral of this story is that, you know, if you feel like you stare at your canvas and you're kind of not knowing what to do, or you're thinking, wow, I spend more time scrolling through Instagram than actually painting, or I sit in my chair looking at my easel and then I get involved in a show hole, or whatever it is that ends up happening to you, create something, and it may suck, and play around, and don't think of it as every painting is going to be a masterpiece, because let me tell you, they are not all going to be masterpieces. In fact, some of them, you know, would be a good kindling, good kindling for a bonfire. But you have to make bad paintings in order to make good paintings, and in order to figure out what your style actually is, you got to play with a whole bunch of different things until you figure it out. And I also think that your style is going to develop. It's not necessarily something that you're going to find, or you're going to discover it in the back of your sketchbook, or look, it's under the couch cushions or something like that. You're going to develop it over time, because it's like a human being. You're not the person you were when you were 17, 25, 30, or 40. So your art isn't going to remain the same throughout your career as an artist. It's going to morph. It's going to change with your perspective, with how you see the world, and the things that actually inspire you. So in conclusion, which I hope that all of that made sense, because I sometimes think that if people actually look at my channel, they're like, what is she all about exactly? Because she's doing this 1 month, and then she's going on to this, or she's working with spray paint over here, and then she's like hardening cardboard to a canvas. All of that is when I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to paint. And finally, for the first time, I do. I actually know myself and know the kind of artist that I am and what I want to be painting. It took a while. It took a while. Full circle, back to childhood, imagination, and writing stories, and then illustrating them with paint. That's what I do. Okay, so anyway, I love you guys. I hope you enjoyed this chat, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay creative, experiment, throw paint at a canvas, whatever it is that floats your boat. And I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.